My name is Phillip Toney. This is my oral portion, part two for the final exam in wildlife conservation policy. Today I'm going to be giving a synopsis of my position on the recent Endangered Species Act debate that was part of part one of this exam. I'll also be talking about the stance of Representative Ralph Norman and what I hope he pulls from the letter that I sent to him. And then I'll also be mentioning a little bit of information about another Endangered Species Act debate that's actually fairly recent within the last month. So where I stand on part one, which was in regards to the northern long-eared bat and the greater prairie chicken, I am definitely supportive of President Biden's veto of joint resolutions 2 and 24 from the Senate floor. I am supportive of this because I believe it was wrong of the Senate to vote to strike down what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service deemed was appropriate and necessary when they use the EPA to try to protect both of those species. And I also would go as far as to say that I think this is a good example of where congressmen, so senators, representatives, are kind of stepping outside of their realm a little bit. Now, that's not to say that some of them aren't educated or have valid, reasonings for why they're choosing certain sides on issues like this, but when it goes against what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is, putting out as best practice or what they think is necessary, I just don't see how you could really argue against the science of it. And that was part of what I liked about President Biden's message after the vetoes, where he mentioned that, in regards to both of these resolutions, they go against the science of the matter, and that was why he vetoed them. So I'm certainly on that side of this issue. The ecological impact for both of these animals, or why they matter ecologically. First, the northern long-eared bat. Their populations declined 99% in Northeast United States. And it's expected that there will be similar decline in the other regions of the country, especially if they don't treat this white nose syndrome, which is wiping them out. Why do they matter, though? Northern long-eared bats are excellent pest control. And, it's easy to first just kind of look at the agricultural side of it. So, pest control for our plants, things that we're growing on farms that we turn around and eat. But we also need to think about the agricultural impacts of other industries. So the timber industry is one example, or really natural tourism. So things like national parks, state parks, national forest, all of those can be impacted, and sometimes greatly impacted with certain pests. And so when you start to have a decline in the natural predators of those pests, like the northern long-eared bat, it can start to have ramifications. So that's why they matter ecologically. The greater prairie chicken, their population has decreased 97% in general, and most of that comes from habitat loss. So that part of the country that they live in has seen large amounts of habitat loss, and because of that, their numbers have just been decimated in recent years. The reason that it matters for them is because not only is that prairie land that they live on a precious commodity at this point, essentially, as far as a wildlife ecological setting, but also by taking care of them, the steps that would be necessary to keep the greater prairie chicken alive and thriving is going to help a lot of other similar species. And you can see I listed a few down there. So certain species of grouse, certain species of sparrows, a lot of other birds are going to thrive if we take the steps necessary to also protect the greater prairie chicken. So there's just kind of that domino effect is how I would look at that. Representative Ralph Norman is a Republican from South Carolina. I chose him because nobody from Alaska was listed on either of the resolutions. And so for me, I did have a little bit of a connection with Ralph Norman, in the sense that I did live in South Carolina for a year, and then of course I attend Clemson University. But really, even more than that, what struck out to me with him was that he was quoted as saying in regards to Joint Resolution 24, which was about the bats, that he hoped that white nose syndrome would wipe all of them out. And I just thought that that was a really uneducated viewpoint and kind of an egregious thing to really put out into the open air, I guess. Um, and the other thing with him is once I started digging into some of his other, viewpoints or stands that he's taken, he's been a large proponent of fossil fuels and their continued use. But he takes that a step further, also saying that the replacements like solar and wind and hydropower, they're all too expensive. They all require too much infrastructure. And he was even quoted in a New York Times article, I believe it was, as saying that they were more polluting than fossil fuels. And the article was actually about how, of course, that's incorrect. And so it just seems when it comes to environmental issues, he's got a lot of ideals or ways that he thinks that just don't line up with what I believe, but also that I don't think are backed by science. And so to me, it seems like he lacks a little bit of empathy for the environment, but he also seems kind of uneducated in this realm. And that's why I thought it would be beneficial for me to send a letter to him. And I'm hoping from that at least in some sort of small way, I could help educate him about the matter, but also get him to kind of reflect on, these beliefs and ideas that he has. And in my letter, I talked to him about, why agriculture and the multifacets of agriculture are important for South Carolina, and so maybe why he should rethink some of those ideas. Lastly, the current ESCA debate that I am talking about is wolverines. They've been on the floor for about 15 years now. They've been trying to get them protected. Of course, different groups like hunters and trappers and fossil fuel groups have opposed those protections, but conservationists have, of course, been fighting for them. Um, Finally, after all of this time, they just passed a bill in late November to protect them and put them onto the list to be protected. And so they will be at the end of this year, by the end of this year, joining the endangered species list, as there's only about 300 of them left in the lower 48. Now, the interesting thing is, again, this law only affects the lower 48. So it's still kind of open for debate in Alaska, where trapping and hunting is a large part of what the state is about and how a lot of people live up here. So it's still kind of an ongoing thing, but at least for the lower 48, they will be joining the endangered species list. Here's my works cited, and I do want to thank you for listening to this presentation.